Lena had been on the streets for what felt like an eternity. Every day was a battle to find food, shelter, and safe heat in a city that often looked past her as if she didn't exist. But even in the face of such harshness, Lena never lost hope. She believed deep down that one day things would get better, that life would give her a chance to stand back up. In the early morning before the city awoke, Lena would walk the quiet streets, searching for anything that might get her through the day. A discarded piece of fruit, a half-empty water bottle, anything that could sustain her. She had become an expert at finding what others missed, knowing the best places to look. Near the market where vendors might toss out old produce, or behind the bakery where yesterday's bread was sometimes thrown away. The city, with all its bright lights and bustling crowds, was a place of hidden corners and overlooked spots where treasures, if you could call them that, were waiting to be found by those who knew where to look. Despite her own hunger, Lena never kept everything for herself. She had a small group of friends, other homeless individuals she had come to know over the years. They were an unlikely family, bound together not by blood, but by shared struggle and the mutual understanding of what it meant to be invisible in a world that only seemed to notice you when it wanted you gone. They looked out for each other as best they could, sharing what little they had. Lena was always the first to offer her findings, making sure everyone got something to eat, even if it meant she went hungry. It wasn't in her nature to hoard or be selfish. If she had something, even if it was just a crust of bread, she shared it. It was her way of fighting back against the coldness of the world, upholding onto her humanity in a place that often seemed determined to strip it away. One cold evening, as she was searching for a place to sleep, Lena spotted Mr. Henry, an elderly man who had been living on the streets even longer than she had. He was a fixture in the community of the unseen, a man whose story was etched into the lines on his weathered face. Mr. Henry was huddled in a doorway, shivering and coughing. Lena's heart sank when she saw him. He didn't look well at all. His skin was pale, and his breath came in ragged gasps. The vibrant, if grizzled old man she knew seemed to have been replaced by a frail shadow. Without hesitation, Lena rushed to his side. "Mr. Henry, you need to get warm," she said, her voice full of concern. The words came out softly, but there was an urgency to them. She knew of a nearby shelter that sometimes had space for the night, so she helped him to his feet, supporting his frail body with her own. He was lighter than she expected, and that realization brought a pang of sadness to her heart. They walked slowly, with Lena gently encouraging Mr. Henry along the way. She talked to him, her words a mixture of gentle coaxing and quiet reassurance, trying to keep his spirits up. Each step was a struggle, but Lena never considered leaving him behind. The city around them bustled with life. Cars honked. People rushed by on their way home or out to dinner, completely oblivious to the two figures making their way through the cold night. It was a cruel contrast, but one that Lena had long since grown used to. When they finally reached the shelter, Lena pleaded with the staff to let him in, explaining his condition. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other in her haste to convey the seriousness of the situation. Thankfully, after a brief discussion and a few tense moments, they found a spot for him, but Lena had to stay outside since there was no more room. She watched as Mr. Henry was led inside, feeling a small measure of relief that he would be warm and cared for, at least for the night. That night, as she found a place to sleep under a bridge, Lena thought about Mr. Henry and hoped he would be okay. The wind whipped around her, biting at her exposed skin, but her thoughts remained with the old man. She wrapped herself tightly in her thin blanket, the cold seeping into her bones, but her concern for Mr. Henry outweighed her own discomfort. Despite her own desperate situation, Lena found comfort in knowing that she had done something good, that she had helped someone in need. It was a small victory, but in her world, small victories were everything. As she drifted off to sleep, the city's noise fading into the background, Lena held onto the small flicker of hope that someday her kindness would be rewarded, and life would finally give her the break she so desperately needed. She didn't know when or how, but she believed that good things would come to those who gave, even when they had nothing. And so she slept with a heart full of hope and a mind full of dreams, waiting for the day when her life would change for the better. Lena's days had settled into a familiar, if exhausting, routine. Each morning, she woke with the sun, her makeshift bed beneath the bridge offering little in the way of comfort or warmth. But Lena wasn't one to complain. She knew how fragile life could be, how easily everything could slip away. So she started each day with a small prayer for strength and the hope that things might change. One chilly morning, as Lena was making her usual rounds in search of food and a few coins, she noticed a well-dressed man standing across the street watching her. He was older, with silver hair neatly combed back and an air of quiet authority. His presence was unusual, almost out of place in the areas Lena frequented, where the streets were more accustomed to the shuffling of worn shoes and the occasional clatter of a dropped coin. Lena felt a slight unease at the man's gaze. She wasn't used to being noticed in such a way. Most people preferred to look right through her, as if acknowledging her existence was too uncomfortable. But this man was different. He didn't look away when their eyes met. Instead, he seemed to be assessing her, his expression thoughtful. Lena continued with her day, trying to shake the strange feeling that she was being watched. But later, as she sat on a bench eating a piece of bread she had managed to find, the man appeared again. This time he approached her directly. Lena tense, unsure of what to expect. She had encountered all sorts of people during her time on the streets, and not all of them had good intentions. "Good morning," the man said, his voice calm and measured. "My name is Mr. Gray." Lena nodded cautiously, her eyes studying him. "Morning," she replied, unsure of what else to say. Mr. Gray didn't seem to mind her hesitation. He looked around, taking in the surroundings before turning his attention back to her. "I've been watching you for a while now, Lena," he said, his tone not unkind. "I've seen how you help others, even when you have so little yourself." Lena blinked in surprise. How did he know her name? And why had he been watching her? The unease in her stomach grew, but she pushed it aside, determined to stay calm. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite her nerves. Mr. Gray smiled slightly, a gesture that softened his otherwise stern features. "I want to offer you a job," he said simply. Lena's eyes widened in disbelief. "A job? What kind of job?" she asked, her voice filled with suspicion. Offers like this didn't just fall out of the sky, especially not for someone in her situation. There had to be a catch. "I need someone to clean my house," Mr. Gray explained. "It's a large place and it requires a lot of upkeep. I've seen how diligent you are, how much care you put into helping others. I think you do well." Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. A job cleaning the mansion? It sounded too good to be true. She had lived long enough to know that opportunities like this often came with strings attached. "Why me?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "There are plenty of people out there looking for work. Why would you choose someone like me?" Mr. Gray regarded her for a moment before answering. "Because you have something that can't be bought or taught. You have heart, Lena. You're kind, even when life has given you every reason not to be. That's rare. And it's something I value." Lena didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to walk away, convinced this was some kind of trap. But another part of her, the part that still held on to hope, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the break she had been praying for. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Okay, I'll do it." Mr. Gray nodded, satisfied with her answer. "Good. We'll start tomorrow. I'll send a car to pick you up." He handed her a small card with an address and a time. "Be ready at 6. With that, Mr. Gray turned and walked away, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts. She stared at the card in her hand, the weight of the decision she had just made settling over her. Was this the right choice? She couldn't be sure, but something told her she had to take the chance. The next morning, as promised, a sleek black car arrived to pick her up. Lena felt out of place as she climbed into the backseat, her worn clothes and weary appearance a stark contrast to the luxury of the vehicle. The drive was smooth and silent, and Lena's mind raced with thoughts of what awaited her. When the car finally pulled up to the mansion, Lena's breath caught in her throat. The house was enormous, more like a castle than a home, with tall gates and sprawling gardens. She had never seen anything like it. The driver opened the door for her, and Lena stepped out, her heart pounding in her chest. Mr. Gray was waiting for her at the entrance. "Welcome, Lena," he said, his voice warm. "This is your new workplace." As Lena walked through the grand halls, her eyes wide with wonder, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. The wealth around her was astounding, but she reminded herself that she was here to work, not to be dazzled by luxury. She spent the day cleaning, scrubbing floors that gleamed under the sunlight, dusting furniture that probably cost more than she could ever imagine. But despite the grandeur, Lena remained focused, doing her job with the same care and diligence she had always shown. She didn't know why Mr. Gray had chosen her, but she was determined not to let him down. As the day came to an end, Mr. Gray approached her. "You've done well, Lena," he said, his approval evident. "But this is only the beginning. There's more to this job than you might think. I'll see you tomorrow." Lena nodded, unsure of what he meant. As she left the mansion and returned to the streets, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. She had taken a step into a new world, but what that world held for her remained a mystery. All she could do was hope that she had made the right choice, and that this chance encounter would be the start of something better. Lena had been working for Mr. Gray for several months, and during that time her life had changed in ways she never imagined. The days of scavenging for food and sleeping under bridges seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the routine of caring for the enormous mansion. Though the work was hard, Lena approached each task with the same care and diligence she had always shown. The mansion, with its marble floors, grand staircases, and priceless artwork, was a world far removed from the one she had known. But she never let it overwhelm her. She stayed focused on her duties, grateful for the opportunity Mr. Gray had given her. Mr. Gray was a mysterious man, reserved and often distant, but he had grown fond of Lena. He observed her closely, noting her dedication and the way she treated everyone with kindness, no matter their station. It was clear to him that Lena was different from others he had encountered. Her heart was pure, untainted by greed or ambition. Yet Mr. Gray was a man who valued integrity above all else, and he needed to be certain that Lena was as genuine as she seemed. One evening, after Lena had finished her work for the day, Mr. Gray called her into his study. The room was dimly lit, with a fire crackling in the hearth and shadows dancing on the walls. Lena had never been inside the study before. It was Mr. Gray's private sanctuary, a place where he conducted his business and kept his secrets. She entered the room cautiously, her heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and anxiety. "Please have a seat," Mr. Gray said, gesturing to a leather armchair opposite his desk. Lena sat down, her eyes flickering nervously around the room, taking in the shelves lined with books and the heavy curtains that blocked out the night. Mr. Gray's face was serious, more so than she had ever seen, and she could sense that something important was about to happen. "Lena," Mr. Gray began, his voice calm but filled with gravity, "you've been working here for several months now, and I've had the opportunity to observe you closely. I've seen your dedication, your honesty, and the way you care for others, even when you think no one is watching." Lena nodded, unsure of where this conversation was leading. "Thank you, Mr. Gray," she replied softly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mr. Gray leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice lowering. "I am not a well man, Lena. I'm dying. The doctors have given me only a few months to live, perhaps less. I have no family, no heirs to leave my fortune to." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. The thought of Mr. Gray, the man who had given her a chance when no one else would, being so close to death, was a shock. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, unsure of what else to say. Mr. Gray held up a hand to stop her. "Thank you, Lena, but I'm not telling you this to seek your pity. I'm telling you because I have a proposition for you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I want to leave my fortune to you, Lena, but before I do, I need to be certain that you are truly deserving of it." Lena's eyes widened in disbelief. "Me? Your fortune? But why?" she stammered, overwhelmed by the idea. It was too much to comprehend. A man she had only known for a few months was offering her a life-changing amount of money, and she couldn't understand why. Mr. Gray smiled slightly, a hint of warmth in his otherwise stern expression. "Because I believe you are a good person, Lena, with a strong moral compass. But I need to be sure. That's why I have devised a series of tests, challenges that will put your integrity, your compassion, and your loyalty to the test. If you can pass these tests, the fortune is yours. If not, I will find another way to dispose of my wealth." Lena's mind raced. What kind of tests was he talking about? What would they entail? But more than anything, she was struck by the gravity of the situation. This was not just about money. This was about proving who she was at her core. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "The test will be difficult, Lena," Mr. Gray warned. "They will challenge you in ways you may not expect. You will face moral dilemmas that will force you to choose between what is easy and what is right. But I have faith in you. I believe you can do it." Lena nodded, a mix of determination and fear coursing through her. She had been tested by life in so many ways already, but this was different. This was a test of her very soul. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm. "I'll take your test, Mr. Gray." And so, the test began. The first challenge seemed simple enough. Mr. Gray gave Lena a large sum of money and asked her to distribute it among a group of people in need. But there was a catch. Not all of the people were genuinely in need, and it was up to Lena to decide who was deserving. She struggled with the decision, torn between her desire to help everyone and the need to be fair. In the end, she trusted her instincts, carefully choosing those who she felt needed the money the most. The next test was even harder. Mr. Gray asked Lena to keep a secret that could potentially harm someone if revealed. Lena wrestled with her conscience, knowing that honesty was important, but also recognizing the potential for harm if the truth came out. After much deliberation, she found a way to protect the person without compromising her integrity, walking a fine line between honesty and discretion. As the test continued, Lena faced challenge after challenge, each one testing a different aspect of her character. There were moments when she nearly faltered, when the temptation to take the easy way out was strong. But each time she reminded herself of who she was and what she stood for. She wasn't just trying to win a fortune, she was trying to stay true to herself. Finally, after weeks of trials, Mr. Gray called Lena back into his study. She entered the room with a sense of unease, unsure of whether she had passed the final test. Mr. Gray looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Lena," he said at last, "you have shown me that you are everything I believed you to be and more. You have passed the test, and you have done so with grace and humility. I am proud to leave my fortune in your hands." Lena felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over her. She had done it. She had stayed true to her values, even when it wasn't easy. As Mr. Gray handed her the documents that would transfer his fortune to her, Lena knew that this was more than just a gift of money. It was a validation of who she was, a recognition of the strength of her character. But even as she accepted the fortune, Lena knew that the test had changed her. She had been reminded that wealth was not the most important thing in life. It was how you use that wealth to make a difference in the world. And with Mr. Gray's fortune, Lena was determined to do just that. Lena's life changed in an instant the day Mr. Gray honored his promise and made her a millionaire. She had gone from having nothing, no home, no security, no future, to suddenly possessing a fortune that most people could only dream of. It was as if she had stepped into another world, one that was bright and glittering, but also filled with shadows that she hadn't anticipated. The day she received her inheritance was surreal. Mr. Gray, true to his word, had ensured that all the legal paperwork was in order. When the lawyer handed Lena the documents confirming that she was now the sole heir to Mr. Gray's vast fortune, she could hardly believe it. The sum was astronomical, more money than she could comprehend. For a moment, Lena felt the rush of excitement. Finally, she would be free from the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for so long. But that excitement was quickly tempered by a deep sense of unease. As Lena left the lawyer's office, she was escorted to a sleek limousine that Mr. Gray had arranged for her. The leather seats were soft and luxurious, the ride smooth and silent. Lena sat in the back, her hands resting in her lap, as the city passed by outside the tinted windows. The same street she had walked as a homeless woman, searching for scraps of food and a place to sleep, now looked different, more distant. She felt disconnected, as if she was floating above it all, not really a part of it anymore. The limousine took her to a grand estate that was now hers. The gates opened automatically, revealing a sprawling mansion with manicured lawns, fountains, and gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Lena stepped out of the car, staring up at the enormous house that was to be her new home. It was beautiful, no doubt, but it felt cold and empty. She had spent so long surviving in the harsh, chaotic world of the streets that this place, with its quiet elegance, seemed almost alien. As she walked through the grand entrance, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors, Lena couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The mansion was fully staffed, with maids, butlers, and gardeners all ready to serve her every need. They greeted her politely, but she could sense their curiosity. Who was this woman who had suddenly inherited such wealth? Lena wasn't sure how to respond to their deference. She wasn't used to being the one in charge, the one with power. Her new life was a whirlwind of changes. Overnight, she found herself thrust into a world of luxury and privilege. She was invited to lavish parties, where the wealthy elite gathered to celebrate their own success. Lena attended these events, dressed in designer clothes that had been selected for her by a personal shopper. She looked the part of a millionaire, but inside she felt like an imposter. The conversations at these gatherings revolved around business deals, vacations to exotic locations, and the latest trends in fashion and art, topics that were foreign to Lena. At first, Lena tried to fit in, to smile and nod politely as people talked at her rather than with her. But the more time she spent in these circles, the more she realized how different she was from everyone else. These people had been born into wealth, or had earned it through connections and opportunities that were never available to someone like her. They had no idea what it was like to struggle, to live on the edge, to fight for every scrap of dignity. As Lena's discomfort grew, so did the number of people who suddenly wanted to be part of her life. Old acquaintances from the shelter and the streets reappeared, eager to reconnect now that she was wealthy. They would come to her with smiles and stories, but Lena could see the hunger in their eyes, hunger for the money she now had. They wanted loans, investments, handouts. And it wasn't just people from her past. New friends emerged, people she had never met before, who were quick to praise her, flatter her, and offer her their companionship. Lena felt overwhelmed by it all. She wanted to help, to give back to those who had been kind to her when she had nothing, but she was wary. How could she be sure who was genuine and who was just trying to take advantage of her? The more she gave, the more people seemed to expect from her. It was exhausting, trying to navigate this new world where everyone seemed to want something from her. Despite the luxury around her, Lena felt lonelier than ever. The mansion was beautiful, but it was also empty. She missed the camaraderie of the streets, the sense of community she had shared with people who understood her struggles. Here, in this world of wealth and privilege, she felt isolated, disconnected from everything that had once defined her. Lena found herself retreating more and more into the private quarters of the mansion, seeking solace in the quiet moments when she could be alone with her thoughts. She would sit by the window, looking out at the vast gardens, and wonder if this was really the life she wanted. Yes, she had money now, but it had come with a price. She had lost the simplicity of her old life, a clear sense of purpose that had driven her every day. As the days turned into weeks, Lena realized that she needed to find a way to reconcile her new wealth with the person she truly was. She couldn't continue living in a world that made her feel so out of place. She needed to find a way to use her fortune to do good, to make a difference in the lives of those who were still struggling, just as she had once been. But first, she had to figure out who she could trust and how to navigate this new world without losing herself in the process. It was a challenge she hadn't anticipated, but one that she knew she had to face if she was going to make her new life meaningful. Lena had always believed that wealth would bring her happiness, that it would free her from the constant worries that had plagued her life on the streets. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, she began to realize that wealth, while providing comfort and security, came with its own set of challenges that were beginning to weigh heavily on her. One of the first signs that her new life was not as perfect as she had hoped came in the form of betrayal. Lena had tried her best to stay connected with the people who had been part of her life before she inherited Mr. Gray's fortune. She felt a deep sense of loyalty to those who had shared her struggles, believing that they too deserved a chance to escape the hardships of the streets. Among those people was Sarah, a woman Lena had once considered a close friend. Sarah had been there for Lena during some of her darkest moments, offering a kind word or a shared meal when it was needed most. So when Sarah reached out to Lena, asking for help now that Lena was wealthy, Lena didn't hesitate. She invited Sarah to stay at the mansion, offering her a place to live while she got back on her feet. At first, things seemed to be going well. Sarah was grateful and polite, always thanking Lena for her generosity. But as time went on, Lena began to notice subtle changes in Sarah's behavior. She became increasingly demanding, asking for money to cover expenses that seemed unnecessary or extravagant. Lena tried to accommodate her friend's requests, but it wasn't long before the demands escalated. One day, Lena discovered that a significant amount of money was missing from her accounts. When she confronted Sarah about it, Sarah's reaction was far from what Lena had expected. Instead of apologizing, Sarah accused Lena of being selfish and ungrateful, claiming that Lena owed her for all the times she had helped Lena in the past. The betrayal cut deep. Lena realized that Sarah had been manipulating her, taking advantage of her kindness for personal gain. The experience left Lena shaken. She had trusted Sarah and believed that their friendship was genuine, but now she saw that wealth had changed the dynamics of their relationship in ways she hadn't anticipated. It was a painful lesson, one that made her more guarded and wary of those around her. As Lena continued to navigate her new life, she also began to encounter the harsh realities of prejudice in high society. Despite her wealth, she was not immune to the racism that had always existed in the world. Many of the people she met at social events, wealthy, influential individuals who were supposed to be her peers, viewed her with suspicion or disdain. They saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their exclusive circles. The whispers were hard to ignore. Some people openly questioned how a black woman like Lena could have come into such wealth, spreading rumors that she had somehow tricked or manipulated Mr. Gray. Others treated her with a cold, condescending politeness, masking their true feelings behind a veneer of civility. Lena quickly learned that no matter how much money she had, there were some barriers that even wealth couldn't overcome. These experiences took a toll on Lena's mental health. She had expected that wealth would bring her happiness, but instead, she found herself feeling increasingly isolated and unhappy. The mansion, once a symbol of her newfound security, now felt like a prison, a place where she was cut off from the world, trapped by the expectations and judgments of those around her. Lena struggled with feelings of self-doubt and anxiety. She began to question whether wealth had truly improved her life, or if it had simply exchanged one set of problems for another. The pressure to maintain her new status, to live up to the expectations placed upon her by society, was overwhelming. She found herself constantly second-guessing her decisions, wondering if she was doing enough to prove that she deserved her fortune. The stress began to affect Lena physically as well. She had trouble sleeping, her mind racing with thoughts of everything that had gone wrong. She lost weight, her appetite disappearing under the weight of her worries. The vibrant, hopeful woman she had once been seemed to be fading away, replaced by someone she barely recognized. Someone who was struggling to keep it all together. Lena tried to find solace in the things that had once brought her joy. Reading, walking in the gardens, helping others, but even these activities felt hollow. The sense of purpose she had once felt was slipping away, leaving her adrift in a sea of wealth that seemed to offer everything except the one thing she truly wanted: peace. As the weeks went by, Lena realized that she needed to make a change. She couldn't continue living like this, constantly battling the pressures and expectations of her new life. She needed to find a way to reclaim her sense of self, to reconnect with the person she had been before wealth had turned her world upside down. It was a daunting prospect, but Lena knew that she had to face it. Wealth had brought her many things: comfort, security, and the chance to help others. But it had also brought challenges she had never anticipated. If she was going to find happiness, she would need to navigate these challenges with the same strength and determination that had carried her through the darkest days of her life. And so, Lena resolved to take control of her life once more. She would find a way to use her wealth in a way that was meaningful, a way that honored the person she truly was. It wouldn't be easy, but Lena had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had survived the streets. Now she would survive this too. And in the process, she hoped she would rediscover the happiness and peace that had always seemed just out of reach. Lena had begun to find her footing in her new life, albeit with some difficulty. She was learning to navigate the complexities of wealth, choosing her friends more carefully, and finding ways to contribute to society. Slowly, the weight of her new responsibility started to feel a little less overwhelming. But just as she was beginning to believe she could handle this new life, everything changed again. One afternoon, while sorting through some paperwork with her lawyer, Lena came across a document that had been buried in the stack of legal papers she had received after Mr. Gray's death. It was an amendment to Mr. Gray's will, something she had overlooked in the initial whirlwind of inheriting his estate. Curious, she asked the lawyer to explain it to her. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This is a codicil to Mr. Gray's will," he began. "It appears that he left you an additional stipulation. According to this document, in order to retain the entirety of your inheritance, you must give away half of your fortune within a year of receiving it." Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to process the information. "Give away half my fortune," she repeated, incredulous. Why would he include something like that? The lawyer shrugged, his expression neutral. Mr. Gray was known for being a man of strong principles. It seems he wanted to ensure that you would use your wealth to make a positive impact on the world. If you don't meet the terms of this clause, the remaining half of your fortune will be donated to various charities of Mr. Gray's choosing. Lena's thoughts swirled as she tried to comprehend the magnitude of the task before her. She had never imagined that Mr. Gray's gift would come with such a significant condition. She had already been struggling to adapt to her new life, and now she was being asked to make decisions that would affect not only her future, but the lives of countless others. For the next few days, Lena could think of little else. The idea of giving away half of her fortune seemed daunting, but it also presented an opportunity. This was her chance to do something meaningful, to make a real difference in the world. But the question remained, how could she distribute the money in a way that would have the most impact? Lena decided to return to her roots, to the place where she had spent so many years struggling to survive. She visited the homeless shelters, the soup kitchens, and the streets where she had once lived. The faces she saw there, some familiar, some new, reminded her of her own journey, of the hardships she had endured, and the small acts of kindness that had helped her along the way. As she reconnected with the homeless community, Lena began to understand that the money she had inherited could do more than just provide temporary relief. It could create lasting change. She spoke with the people who ran the shelters and programs, asking them what they needed most. They told her about the challenges they faced: the lack of affordable housing, the need for mental health services, the difficulty of helping people find stable employment. Lena's heart swelled with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to use her wealth in a way that truly mattered. She began making plans, working closely with the organizations that had supported her during her darkest days. She wanted to make sure that every dollar she gave away would have a meaningful impact on the lives of those who were still struggling. She started by funding a new housing project for homeless families, ensuring that they would have a safe place to live while they got back on their feet. She also invested in job training programs, helping people develop the skills they needed to find stable employment. And she donated to mental health services, understanding the importance of providing support for those who were battling unseen demons. As Lena began to distribute her wealth, she noticed a change within herself. The burden of her fortune, which had once felt so heavy, began to lift. For the first time since inheriting Mr. Gray's estate, Lena felt a true sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just a wealthy woman living in a mansion. She was someone who was making a difference, someone who was giving back to the community that had once been her lifeline. The year passed quickly, and as the deadline approached, Lena found herself reflecting on the journey she had taken. She had given away half of her fortune, just as Mr. Gray had required, but she didn't feel any sense of loss. In fact, she felt richer than ever, not in material wealth, but in the knowledge that she had used her resources to change lives. On the final day of the year, Lena visited the last project she had funded, a community center that offered free meals, shelter, and job training to anyone in need. As she walked through the building, seeing the smiles on the faces of the people there, she realized that this was what Mr. Gray had intended all along. He had known that true wealth wasn't just about money. It was about how you use that money to make the world a better place. Lena left the community center with a heart full of gratitude. She had passed the ultimate test, not just by giving away her wealth, but by discovering what truly mattered in life. As she drove back to her mansion, she knew that she would continue to use her fortune to help others, not because she had to, but because it was the right thing to do. Mr. Gray's final lesson had been a gift, one that had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. As Lena stood in the grand hall of the newly established Gray Foundation named in honor of the man who had given her a second chance at life, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. The foundation had just been officially inaugurated, and the event was filled with people from all walks of life: community leaders, former colleagues from the streets, and those who had already begun to benefit from the programs funded by the foundation. Lena had successfully fulfilled the conditions of Mr. Gray's will, and in doing so, she had discovered a new purpose that filled her heart with joy. The Gray Foundation was a testament to Lena's journey and the lessons she had learned along the way. Using the wealth she had inherited, she created an organization that would make a lasting impact on the lives of the homeless and marginalized. The foundation funded a variety of initiatives, including the construction of new shelters, the development of education programs, and the establishment of job training centers. Each project was carefully chosen to address the root causes of homelessness, providing not just temporary relief, but a pathway to long-term stability and independence. The first shelter built by the foundation was a state-of-the-art facility that offered more than just a place to sleep. It provided comprehensive services, including mental health counseling, substance abuse treatment, and legal aid, ensuring that residents had the support they needed to rebuild their lives. The shelter also featured a community kitchen, where volunteers, many of whom were former residents, cooked meals for the homeless population. Lena often visited the shelter, spending time with the residents, listening to their stories, and offering words of encouragement. The education programs funded by the Gray Foundation were equally transformative. Recognizing that many homeless individuals lacked the skills and qualifications needed to secure stable employment, Lena ensured that these programs offered a wide range of courses, from basic literacy and numeracy to vocational training in fields such as healthcare, construction, and information technology. The foundation partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeship opportunities, giving participants the chance to gain hands-on experience and build a professional network. But perhaps the most innovative aspect of the Gray Foundation was its job training centers. Lena understood that finding a job was often only half the battle. Keeping it required confidence, resilience, and a supportive community. The centers provided not only technical training but also life skills workshops that covered everything from financial literacy to time management and conflict resolution. Graduates of the program were matched with mentors who guided them through the challenges of their new careers, helping them navigate the transition from homelessness to self-sufficiency. As word of the Gray Foundation's work spread, Lena became a symbol of hope and resilience within the community. People admired her not just for her wealth, but for the way she had chosen to use it. Her story of a woman who had once lived on the streets, who had experienced the harsh realities of life and had still found the strength to rise above it all, resonated with many. Lena's humility, kindness, and unwavering commitment to helping others earned her the respect and gratitude of those who had once dismissed her as just another homeless person. Throughout all of this, Lena remained true to the values that had guided her from the beginning. She never lost sight of where she had come from or the people who had helped her along the way. She continued to maintain connections with the homeless community, ensuring that their voices were heard in the decision-making processes of the foundation. Lena often invited former friends from the streets to visit her home, sharing meals and conversations, never forgetting the solidarity they had shown her during her darkest times. As the years passed, the impact of the Gray Foundation grew. More shelters were built, more education programs launched, and more lives transformed. Lena's vision of a world where everyone had the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their circumstances, was becoming a reality. The Foundation's work was recognized not just locally, but nationally, with other cities looking to replicate its successful model. Lena was often invited to speak at conferences and events, where she shared her story and the lessons she had learned about compassion, resilience, and the true meaning of wealth. One evening, as Lena sat in her office at the Foundation, reflecting on all that had been accomplished, she felt a profound sense of contentment. She had done more than just honor Mr. Gray's will. She had built a legacy of love, one that would continue to grow long after she was gone. The fortune that had once felt like a burden had become a powerful tool for change, transforming not just her life, but the lives of countless others. As she looked out the window, watching the sun set over the city that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving, Lena allowed herself to smile. She thought of Mr. Gray, the man who had seen something in her that she hadn't even seen in herself. She hoped that, wherever he was proud of what she had done with the gift he had given her. Lena knew that her journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still people who needed help, still battles to be fought. But she also knew that she was no longer alone in this fight. She had built a community, a network of people who shared her vision and her commitment to making the world a better place. Together, they would continue to work toward a future where everyone, regardless of their background, had the opportunity to thrive. The story of Lena, the homeless woman who became a millionaire, was more than just a tale of rags to riches. It was a story of redemption, of finding purpose, and of the transformative power of love and compassion. As Lena closed her eyes and took a deep breath, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in a long time. She had used her wealth not just to enrich her own life, but to create a legacy that would live on for generations. A legacy of love, hope, and resilience. If you enjoyed Lena's inspiring story and want more tales that uplift and motivate, don't miss out. Subscribe now to stay connected and receive the latest stories that touch your heart and ignite your spirit.